it is important for us to also understand the criteria of how IEBC chooses countries to participate in the electoral process, especially in the diaspora. I went through what is in their regulations. They consider 4 factors. One is the security relationship that Kenya has with that country. They consider the issue around the existence of an embassy, consulate, or a high commission. And then they also look at as far as the cost and the budget. So these are some of the 4 key areas. But in that, we've seen that there is a mismatch when it comes to aligning that priority with the areas of those countries where Kenyans are densely populated. We find a mismatch. The US is a good example. And then we also see that when it comes to the issues around, first of all, the mismatch of aligning that kind of like the density of the populated, and also the cost implications that this positioning of those diaspora centers create. So the criteria is important. And then secondly, there was an issue around, could this expansion also trigger what we call some legal challenges? Because countries can come up and say, or diasporans in various countries can say, look, we've not been considered, we've not been given a chance to prove what we can offer in terms of the priorities that the IEBC has. So why were we left out? And I think that's a legitimate question that many of them can ask. So therefore, it's important and incumbent to the IEBC to be very clear in explaining that. And then the expectation at the moment, we have gone 15 plus years, and there's a need to really revisit that issue of progressiveness. And in my view, we should have what we call some metrics that will compel IEBC to match those metrics as we go ahead. So that was one issue. Then the other issue was that really brought a very good discussion was the idea around how does the IEBC deal with the budgetary cost and the implications. And there were 3 points that were very clear. We know that the IEBC has to invest in the logistics. There's international logistics, sending the staff in, sending the items for voting, ensuring the security, training individuals. So we expect staff to be trained. And also the technology deployment, because they have to send KIMS kits, they have to make sure they are working, they have to make sure they have extra just in case things don't work. So these issues of logistics and how you organize this kind of an election is not easy, and there's a cost element to it. We've put across to the IEBC as diaspora and said, could the diaspora also participate in making sure that they provide the human resource that is required? We know the IEBC wants to have responsibility from A to Z of their staff so that if there's anything that goes wrong, they know who to blame. But we are saying we can offer at least a buffer in terms of some of the human resource implications. And then lastly, there was the issue around the logistics and complexity. Deployment of trained officials, we know that's an issue. There is the issue around the secure transportation of the sensitive information, especially after the elections, before and after, and even during the election process. We've also talked about the coordination, especially between embassies and different consulates with the IEBC now that they've increased the portfolio. So that brings what we call the complexity of the operations that are expected. So in summary, we've covered a bit of that. And just one more point that we talked about was the issue around does the issue of having a lower number of voters, like in 2022 when we have 10,444, does it discourage the investment that is made to the expansion? Could that be a factor that parliamentarians need to be able to hinge on to say, then we don't give you any more budget? Our argument is that I think that particular point is not true today, because when you look at the cost of voting in the diaspora, which is the point that Obedzai made at the end there, of people traveling from one point to the other, is extremely high. And then when you look at the issues of convenience of voting, it's made so difficult. And that shouldn't happen to a community of diasporians who remit. And just let's be clear, we remitted in 2025 over $5 billion. That is over 650 billion Kenya shillings. So you cannot really disenfranchise a constituent of a country that brings that kind of revenue to the country. Back to you, Eli.
Interesting perspective there by Dr. Martin Koyabe. Dr. Martin Koyabe is a Kenya diaspora leader based in the UK. He's also a Diaspora Technical Working Group member. And he said, for the purposes of clarity, so that we don't leave any room for people to start and gossiping here and there. He is a strong UDA party member based in the diaspora. Obeds, I think it's now my honor and privilege to officially say our X space is finally live and kicking. I think the donkeys were tired, but tumelazimisha sisi. We don't spare them. Obeds, over to you.
That's good. I like the summary that he has done.